Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Politics, your favorite shut-in habit on a Friday night. Where else are you gonna go? What else are you gonna do? Nothing's good on television, but we're here on YouTube
Apparently,
and
Dr. Unkefer had something else to do.
and Facebook
No,
Live.
really.
He might be taking a nap. Dr. Uncle might be taking a nap.
It's been a long week.
Yeah. And also he's been doing the burning the lines, getting us sponsors for the county club's Trump Thursday event with David Bussey. That's coming up next week.
At 7:30 p.m., streaming on our
Yep.
county club page
Yeah,
and on
and-
Trump Montgomery.
Yep, and also going to be on YouTube Live. And by the way, to just put in a plug and do my Graham Stephan impression, go to the Montgomery County Republican Club, as well as the Dr. Politics YouTube page, and smash that like button.
Ah, look who woke up.
Hey, Dr. Unkefer, how was your nap?
All right. Adjust your camera so I can see the rest of your face.
We are live, so anything you
There
say
we
can
go.
and will be used against you in a court of law.
Now we can start. Shall we?
Yes.
Shall we start with our topics now, guys?
Let's do it.
Sure.
What do you have for us tonight?
What are our topics?
Let's start with America reopening or the states reopening. We're starting to see that on a pretty good scale. Georgia, Texas, these other, Oklahoma, these states are opening up. I was looking at a Wall Street Journal article. I think Georgia had 4 million people show up at various things, whether or not they were shopping stores or entertainment venues, restaurants, whatever. So America is slowly getting back to business, but it is a little bit uneven. We've been talking about this for weeks. Is that we have 50 states, they have 50 governors. They're going to act 50 different ways potentially, and they are. I mean, Georgia has definitely been kind of the leader on this. Others are jumping in. Maryland, we're still I'm not sure where we're going in Maryland. Virginia seems to be making a little more progress than Maryland on that.
West
So-
Virginia made their announcement today, and I
mean,
was looking at that
Who would
graphic.
have thought Governor Blackface would have opened up his state faster than?
You know what? I'm not
Maryland.
surprised that Governor Hogan is taking a more conservative approach here. I think he wants to give it a week or so, see if there's a spike in cases in any of these states that are the first ones opening up, and then I think if he sees that there's really not a significant rise in cases, I think that's when he'll start making an attempt to start opening things back up.
I think.
Oh, Mark, we can't hear you. Oh gosh. Here it goes
Yeah.
again. Week 2 in a row.
Hey, but it's.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
So here's one of the things though is Maryland is in a different position than the rest of the country, which is our cases are continuing to go up at a faster rate than the overall country. It was up 8% today. Hospitalizations have plateaued, but they're still continuing to go up. So the circumstances that exist in other states are really not the circumstances here in Maryland. And it's probably worth prefacing Maryland, there are counties with very few cases. There are counties with lots of cases, and Prince George's County and Montgomery are two of the hardest hit counties.
Absolutely. I think we're rising 45% week over week here.
Yeah, but
Recently.
You know, I
they are
think
the most densely populated counties. I'm sure Baltimore County's not too far behind.
Well,
I-
actually, it is. I mean,
Really?
relative to population, no. But Prince George's County is, again, it's smaller than Montgomery County, but I can't remember the precise numbers, but we're like about a third more or something like that.
I think one of the other things that really not came to light, but was made much more aware of this week, is that a very disproportionate number of Maryland's cases are in the nursing homes, which is an interesting thing to look at when you're thinking about this, because right now it's really being thought of as part of the general populace in terms of how do we treat the change in case numbers. Now, whether that should be the case or whether we should treat those almost as a separate population with a unique set of challenges is another question, but maybe I'm not qualified to answer, but I think we should at least have that conversation of should we really look at the whole population as one set here for making these decisions.
Well, I think one part of the reason senior citizens and the most vulnerable. What's it? It's not as bad as everyone said it was. And
I don't think that's a great
No, but
reassuring.
Is that a campaign slogan? It's not as bad as it could have been.
You know,
Can I get that? Can I get that on my mask?
Yes.
Dwight Patel for State Senate 2024. It's not as bad as it could have
It
been.
won't be as bad.
Hey, here's the thing. I'm sure my friend Spiro would have loved to use that as a campaign slogan.
And there it is. What are we? 6
There you
minutes
go.
in?
Only like 5 minutes in.
I felt, it's like, today,
But Spiro only once won re-election, right?
no, he only ran once, and then 2 years later, it's like when he was.
I know he only
Yeah.
won
Yeah.
the election.
In
He was
In
not the
theory,
top of the
in
ticket.
1972, he could have come back.
How
and
did we
run for
get sucked
governor.
in?
I know. Why are you giving in to
Ryan,
this?
I didn't.
memo to Ryan. Got to be much quicker on the mute button and cut both Dwight and I off.
No, but here's the thing. But seriously, it's not as bad as it all could have been. I think.
That's like terrible. I mean, that's a terrible message.
let me tell you.
I mean, just step away and think about that for a moment.
Look, here's the thing. Okay, we're not as bad as the Tricoms. we're-
Nobody knows.
Nobody
Yeah.
knows.
They both. Yeah.
I'm gonna take what China officially tells us and multiply it by a factor of 10, and I think that's going to be close to what's really.
But you know what? Some news that did come out is that Gilead, I believe, their vaccine was approved by the FDA today.
Yep.
So that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Operation Warp Speed.
And,
I
and
love
it's
that. I love that campaign.
It's
name,
interesting
too.
because I remember, I don't know if I read an article or heard an article, I think it was on a podcast, was that when the original vaccine didn't really come out, China had go ahead and slapped a patent on it. So, it's
we know they.
I think we really have to start taking. I think an appropriate response to China spending decades ripping off our intellectual property is this one time. I think we should come back and give a big middle finger to China and say,
Exactly.
I say, if ever there was a time to ignore patent laws, I think the vaccine for a global pandemic.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
Tricoms have
Time.
respected patent laws all over the world, right? I mean, eye for an eye, copyright infringement for copyright infringement, China.
Okay, sorry. The doctor in my text phone has said that it's a treatment, not a vaccine. I stand corrected.
But there is an Oxford University study that's very promising, and they think they'll have a vaccine ready by September, which is great.
Israel too. They're very
I think that's a little bit ambitious. It's like Casey was telling Susan on Direct Line when she was saying we'll have a vaccine in January. He's like, you don't know, no one knows anything. So I think,
But we do have we do have effective treatment. That's my point. Is this: if you get COVID-19, there's good odds that you're going to make it through to the other side.
I'm not sure if this is,
I
of
have
course.
seen the miracle happen firsthand. My friend that I had mentioned when this first began, who was in the ICU, has been moved to a rehab facility. He's doing well. I was able to video chat with him on my birthday. He's living proof that you can survive
Yeah.
this, and he was one of the ones who probably could have very easily been one of the ones who didn't make
I mean,
it.
just to be perfectly clear, the survival rate among the general population is like 98%, right? So most people do survive this. This is not I remember a few weeks ago, Dwight was saying, you're more likely to survive than die. And that's a much more dire scenario, right? Where there's a 50%.
Dwight is very much a half-empty, half-full kind of guy.
Yeah, but
50-50.
Dwight, I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to,
maybe
but
it's because I'm a Republican. Well, we're all Republicans, but I'm an optimist. I think I think look, we're America. We've gotten through far worse than this. I mean,
At the
Live-
risk of agreeing with Dwight, I will point out that one of the unknowables
we
point is how many people have actually had
we
it so
lived
far.
through 8 years of Barack Hussein Obama.
yeah. I think
No.
to kind of pivot back, I'm not sure, Dwight, if this is
That's
what you
not a
were.
really good comparison.
I'm not sure if this is what you were referring to, but there was some promising, very early studies done on remdesivir this week. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But anyways, about how that could be a very effective therapeutic for when you get the virus, potentially shortening the people who are severe enough to need hospitalization or potential interventions in the ICU or with a ventilator, shortening those hospital visits from maybe 2 weeks. They were saying 5 to 10 to maybe even 5 days. So if we can reach the point where, and that is much more easy to say, okay, we can have this by a date, because there already are things that are not just in the works, but being going through trials and just on the path to approval. So we can say if we can get it to the point of being down where the treatment is much less burdensome on the hospital system, that is a big milestone that we can look forward to.
And we have learned, I mean, in New York in particular, made some horrendous mistakes with nursing homes. So the focus had been on hospitals. And so when some nursing homes experienced cases, the New York State Health Department wouldn't let people who were sick go to the emergency facilities because they said those were being held in reserve for the hospitals, and that resulted in just dozens of people dying at single nursing homes. In another nursing home upstate, the guidance from the Department of Health was that infected employees could go back and continue working, and that was done over the objection of the local county health officials. So, I mean, the most generous thing to say is we've now learned that that's not what you want to do, and that we need to be far more cautious about nursing homes. But that's stuff that apparently has just been it took a number of weeks to learn.
That's right. I'm going to say one thing, Dwight. You said 10 times. I think there was the White House had said they think that Chinese numbers, it's 50 times would be more. Maybe it's somewhere between 10 and 50. I don't know.
That's a range.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me. Like here's one thing. Okay, what do we know about the Chi-Coms? We know they're dishonest. We know they're red. They are still communists. We never would have given the Soviets most favored nation status. We never would have let the Soviets into the World Trade Organization. We never would have done half the stuff we're doing for China for the Soviets. China is the new evil empire.
I would just like to step in with a PSA. We're referring specifically to those in charge in the government, not everybody in China as a whole.
Yeah.
Just getting
No, we're
that
talking.
out
We're
there.
talking.
In case AOC was listening, right?
Yes. Marcus, you look like you have something to add.
Well, I was actually looking up the original numbers that we were talking about, like the impact on Maryland, and yeah, just looking at the Maryland current coronavirus dashboard, we're saying in Montgomery County it's 4,700 cases, Prince George's County 6,700, Baltimore County 3,000, Baltimore City 2,000, so combined more than Montgomery. And then, various others like Anne Arundel 1,800, Howard 900, Frederick almost 1,000. And then actually Carroll has 460, but I think a lot of that came from the Mount Airy. Yeah, that area. So.
But relative to population, Prince George's County has been particularly hard. And I'm not sure I did the exact math, but back of the envelope, it seemed that it's continuing to grow at a faster rate. But the state as a whole jumped 8% today, which is a fast rate, and certainly not what it has been happened. There hasn't been a day in nearly 3-4 weeks where the country has grown as fast as Maryland did in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're in the middle of our surge right now, so hopefully the upside to that is that we should start seeing that downward slope in the coming weeks.
Right.
Yeah, I think during the press conference when he announced the plan for reopening, Governor Hogan said he'd hoped to have phase 1 started by mid-May. So I don't know what he was looking at to inform that statement, but if that's true, that would mean he would be expecting, whatever models they have would be expecting a downturn in the next few days to at least begin, or to peak. Not a downturn, but a peak in the next
So
few
one
days.
of the criteria was a decrease in the number of hospital beds taken by COVID, and although I think in the last day it inched up 50 or 100 or so it has not gone down as yet. It's been fairly flat for the last week, and so there may be some hope that that'll begin to turn down.
When you said 8%,
Obviously, that's a lagging. Understand that that's a.
Of course.
Hospitalizations are a lagging indicator.
when you said 8% increase, was that the number of positive cases tested?
That was the number of positive cases. So
Oh.
yes. So yesterday it was 21,700, and today it was 23,400.
I think at this point we really can't use cases as an indicator, and I think that's the governor didn't say the exact same thing, but they said that's not the metric they're using for the 2-week trend. And the reason is that when you're going to increase testing, especially they haven't really been used yet, but 500,000 tests from South Korea. Just to be very clear.
Korea has no cases.
Yeah, North Korea has no cases, except for Kim Jong-un came down with something else, but that's all.
Oh, apparently he made his first public appearance today, according to the.
But if you're adding 500,000 tests, of course you're going to see an increase in cases because you just tested 500,000 more people than you were testing before, and they were going undetected.
Well, actually, there are also Maryland has great metrics, much more detailed than some other jurisdictions, and so it does show the rate of increase in the number of cases. I think, remember when we were on Direct Line, it was Governor Allen who said, well, gee, they ought to break these statistics out by zip code, which I don't even know if they do that yet in Virginia, but is done. Was done.
Yeah, he had great things to say about Governor Hogan's.
And also the other one is the recovery rate, which is and I noticed that Maryland posts that, but most jurisdictions don't yet show when people have ceased to have the disease, which is obviously helpful too.
I think we've spent a nice portion of time talking about coronavirus. There's so much going on.
Let's move on to another topic. Let's talk about education, then we'll go to some Democrat and the politics side of this. But just kind of keeping along on this coronavirus thing, just in the way it's affected education, because I'm kind of curious. We're seeing lots of school systems around the country saying, we're done. We're shutting down. We're going to shut down by May 15th or whatever. I haven't heard anything in the state of Maryland. I think Maryland is up to, May 15th? But for all intents and purposes, I think they're kind of done. Montgomery County, if I'm correct, they're doing a pass-fail for students, for this last quarter that they just did, and I guess for the quarter that they're into now. I'm kind of curious as to what you think about, should school try to be, should they just cancel it at this point in time? Also, we have California, where Governor Newsom said maybe start school in July, probably, to make up for some of the lost time. Is that type of thing a good idea? And pass-fail, to like Ryan, who's a recent product of Montgomery County schools, how does that affect the students? I mean, how, in terms of with a GPA, you have to have a pass-fail.
One thing I will say is that this is a classic example, and this happens with liberal organizations, especially, the teachers' union is a prime example, all the time, where in the pursuit of justice, they actually create an injustice. And I think this is a perfect example. They kind of got this idea from colleges and universities, but the big distinction is that was an optional pass-fail. If you are which really was designed for people who, let's say you came down with COVID, or a family member came down with COVID, or you were facing economic hardship, or you didn't have good internet, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or if you, anything else, extra stress, whatever it may be, you could choose to do pass-fail. There wasn't really any proof necessary. It was just if you feel you need this, you can have it, but if you want to earn a grade, you can earn a grade. But what MCPS has done is they've taken away that choice. What if you wanted to earn a grade? Should students not be allowed to be rewarded for their work? I don't think the default option should ever be to not have a grade. I think that's just ridiculous, and that's just as unfair to the students who either wanted to or were counting on it, either to raise the GPA or for some other reason where they wanted a grade in a specific course. You are now taking away and committing that same injustice just in the opposite direction. And it would not have been hard at all to provide the option, like almost everywhere else where they got this idea from has done. I don't know why they've done this. The defense of it was that it would be inequitable to allow some people to get a grade and some people to not. And it's all a bunch of nonsense, in my opinion.
Ryan, you know what's going to happen at the end of the day? Everybody's going to get an A. Everybody will feel good about it.
Well, no, everyone's going to get a pass. That's the point.
It's a pass. That's the whole point.
And it won't boost your GPA.
Right.
Now, speaking as someone who might be the most qualified person here, as not a parent and hasn't been in the in school for a while, in terms of elementary school, middle school, high school.
Rob's not 30 years out.
I find it to be a really interesting thing to see because, there's some statistic out there. I think that over the summer period alone, students lose about 80% or more, probably more than that, of what they learned during the previous school year. And I think that this is going to have a lot more long-term effects than we realize. If we're canceling schools, and let's be honest, most of these parents are woefully unprepared to homeschool their children, you're going to see huge decreases, I think, in preparedness for the next grade up. So I think it's way more interesting if we see decisions by certain schools to, I don't even know if it's just have them everyone repeat a grade or something like that. I don't think it's something they could even
Yeah.
consider
Yeah,
kids
so
going to college.
Well,
A lot of the
here's
curriculum is structured such that, you know, you're assumed to know certain things when you enter into the next year. So if you're starting calculus in the fall, like you can't have missed
Half
the
of
last
pre-calc.
yeah. So that doesn't work. To go to the earlier comment about just how Montgomery County is doing it, and the fourth quarter is pass fail, but the third quarter, you still it wasn't completely done, so there was still a little bit of time in there, but you might not have if you have the option in the way that their classes are structured to make up work, you didn't necessarily get that option to do that. Furthermore, okay, so if the fourth is pass fail, but the third you got a certain grade, what's the semester grade? Really, you have to turn the whole semester into a pass fail, and then how do you account for that with a GPA? So I think that those are all still being worked out, but it's not. I mean, it's not really a pleasant situation. And then the other question of, well, why are we going to summer break? Is it because everyone has had so much schooling that you need to, now you need to go and not have school?
It's a
I mean,
societal
Marcus.
expectation. GW added a fall break. I think it was after my freshman year, because too many kids were trying to commit suicide. Because the first break in the fall semester, from a college perspective, without the fall break that we added, after school started, the first break was Thanksgiving.
You didn't get. They took away Columbus Day. GW used to give Columbus Day off.
Okay, that
That's sick.
But in terms of why is there a summer break, I mean, there's a lot of other countries that don't have a summer break. They just have consistent.
When given the choice
there's
between
been an expectation that they have the summer off.
That's why kids are committing suicide at GW now.
okay, we're gonna
never
steer away
knew
from.
that. I'm sorry, I never realized that Columbus Day was really this is not funny, but intended to stop people from committing suicide.
No, but if you think about it, it was a nice 3-day weekend. You got
Yeah.
a 4-day weekend. You got in October.
For what it's worth,
That's what fall break is. It's not around an official holiday, but it's just like, here's a couple of days off between the beginning of the semester and Thanksgiving,
yes.
which is also like right after midterms.
Yeah, for what it's worth,
Very stressful a couple
Virginia Tech created the fall break however many years ago, only because the fall semester was 1 day longer, and apparently that created a hardship for professors. But
That sounds right.
But yeah, no, but going back to breaks in general, I mean, and I feel like the U.S. economy kind of, there's a lot that rides on that summer tourism period.
Mhm.
You know, people going to the beaches, I grew up every summer since I was, 8, going to sleepaway camp all summer, and there are industries that would suffer from no longer having a summer break.
I also think, back to the societal expectations point, I just think from what really is going to impact especially elementary and middle school kid in the long run, I think the return to normalcy and kind of trying to establish back into the routine that they're expecting is going to have a much bigger impact long term for them than maybe a little bit of missed content in the third grade, right? I think that we can, not to disparage third grade teachers, but I think that you can kind of adjust the curriculum to make up for that. Now, when you get to more advanced subjects, that becomes more difficult. But
yeah, I mean, I definitely see the impact a lot on students who are preparing to transition from middle to high school, and upper class students who are preparing for the SAT as well as preparing for college.
And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong. Montgomery County Schools got rid of class ranking, right, a couple years ago.
ever before I was in high school, so
More
at
than
least
that. It's been a long
yes.
time.
And they've also gotten rid of what do you call it? Valedictorian and salutatorian.
Well, no, they just make everyone a valedictorian because they don't base
so
it.
everyone's a winner.
They don't base it off of the weighted GPA.
I went to Quaker school, so it's not Quakerly to let someone be
You can't be better
called
than
out as smarter than everybody else.
Right.
Let me just ask you a couple of quick things, and then we'll move on here with the education thing. Do you think that this might potentially lead to more school systems potentially going to a year-round school? There are some that are existing now, but I'm looking at this. I'm thinking about the scenario under coronavirus, where if you had year-round school, you have these periods of time. Kids are in school, and then they've got a short break and then go back. In between, it's a chance for the schools to go through, say, a deep clean or whatever, and prepare the school. I mean, it takes away from the long summer breaks. And or do some of the parents who've got their kids in public school that haven't pulled their hair out, like Jackie kind of alluded to with homeschooling, will they opt for homeschooling in the future rather than public school?
Well, let's flip that around though, which is that we're assuming that we have to take the brick and mortar educational process and somehow update it. The prospect, the alternative is certainly not for elementary school, but at least for high school, is to allow for more online education for shorter modules that get completed and then have some kind of online testing that does that. And then to encourage those students that can and are interested to be able to progress through multiple modules and take advantage of that. And to really, how should I say this becomes an opportunity to encourage students to be able to learn at their own pace, not necessarily tied to the calendar year of the high school, but with an ability to move forward, perhaps a little faster, a little slower, depending on what their circumstances are.
And Mark, I think to your point, I think that we're going to see a shift in college education to see a lot more online courses. So having that option available for high school would actually prove to be beneficial in college preparedness. You know, do you have the skills and the maturity to pace yourself and make sure you're putting in that work without being chained to a desk and forced to listen to a teacher? You know, it really does take a lot more self-control to sit down and say, I'm going to learn this material on my own, or I'm not going to pass the class.
I think that, and speaking of colleges, I think that where it's kind of heading in the fall, and we'll have more announcements in the coming weeks, is that there's going to be a return to on-campus instruction, but the large lecture hall classes that might have, say, 200, 300 people in them, even anything over 100, might be moved to online, and that's really not as big of a deal because those classes aren't as much about the interaction with the professor anyway. You're just kind of there to absorb information and not interact with anyone. But I think that could be a change that sticks permanently, just because, you know, it's kind of a weird concept anyway. If the class is not based on that sort of personal interaction, why are you forcing everyone to go at the same time and, you know, sit through a lecture at the same pace?
But Don, to address your questions, the first one about year-round schooling, alluding to my earlier points, I think you're going to see a lot of pushback on that if it's something that's suggested. I think, you know, a lot of students look forward to that time. Like I said, going to summer camp or taking that vacation, families as well, plan vacations around that time. And the other thing being, will more parents choose to homeschool? I think I've heard of enough parents so frustrated with the entire process and gaining new respect for what teachers do every day that they're like, I couldn't do this for 2 months. You expect me to do it, you know, for 12 years?
Here's what I think could happen, though, is I think this could be the end of snow days. Because if we learn that we can have online assignments that are queued up and ready to go, why should we ever add days onto the calendar at the end of the year to accommodate snow days can become online instruction days?
But they're still going to have to work out those glitches with people who don't have as much access to good internet.
Not only that, Ryan, remember back when MCPS made a lot of noise when the governor said we're going to start school after Labor Day?
Yes.
That's a moot point now. You know, we're going to start, you know, it's good.
How is that a moot point?
It is, because, first of all, okay, if school is so important and if they can't get their acts together with this, they want to cancel the year and give a pass-fail, you know, we can start school on August 1st, and it's really not going to improve the quality.
But Dwight,
of the
would
schools.
you want school to start
No.
at the same week as the Republican convention? I mean,
No. I think
won't kids want to stay home and watch it?
Of course, you know, and I think the networks do a big disservice by not doing gavel to gavel coverage like they used to do. I remember the 1980 convention. It was gavel to gavel coverage.
God. See, we have a vested interest, those of us on this show, is that we want Virginia Tech to switch to after Labor Day.
Yeah.
Because we want a certain Ryan to come down and join us in Charlotte.
Yes, except Charlotte's only a 2-hour drive away, so maybe for the weekend, we'll see.
I can
That
wear
might
a
work.
name tag
Stay
that
tuned.
says Ryan if that makes you feel better.
What about
All right.
this, though? If we do this online learning, particularly like in high schools, could we? I mean, and I'm looking at this as us as political type of people, is there a way for us to somehow push, as part of a curriculum of where, people like us get to speak before the high school students? I mean, I think
Probably not.
Well, people like us,
it may
no.
not work in Montgomery County, but maybe something in another county or another part, or is just generally for political operatives or what activists like us around the country to gain a little bit more of a toehold in areas where we wouldn't have been able to get in for various reasons. I mean, the Democrats could do the same thing, though they pretty much control the agenda anyway.
Right.
But logistically, it would be very easy to get on Zoom or do a Skype thing or whatever, with the kids if they're going to go online.
I think Marcus, though, touched on it is just how shall I say, structured the curriculum is in Montgomery County, that there's a lot less flexibility, not as much flexibility as they had at Quaker schools.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to openly say, look, we're not here to push a political agenda. We're trying to get them ready for the next grade or for college.
Right.
But, I've read textbooks. There's some political agenda in there, and I don't think they're going to give the other side a chance to openly speak just for the sake of equality.
Right.
Here's the thing. What I found getting into some of the schools, if you want to get into, back in my younger days, I used to go back to Blair and talk to kids on career day, and I was asked not to come back after career day 2002. I was asked not to come back.
None of us can imagine what possibly could have precipitated something like that.
Craig Zucker
He
used
gave
to
a
work for.
presentation on Spiro Agnew.
No. You see, Craig Zucker used to work for Albert Wynn. He was also speaking, and he brought some, another lefty from his office, from Albert Wynn's office. She basically had the gall to say 9/11 was our fault because we left them hanging. And I said, excuse me, no, I have got to respond to that. I cannot let that go by, telling these kids full of mush that 9/11 was our fault. And ever since then, I stand up for America, and they don't want me to come back and talk to the kids.
Well, I guess you beat my dad, who came in to talk about being a doctor on career day at my school, and basically told them not to go to medical school because medicine's going down the toilet during the Obamacare era. Anyway.
Andy Harris said the same thing to my nephew who's in med school now. He said,
let's just, I want to ask a quick question here. One more question on education, and we'll move on. Kerwin. I mean, the funding for, with all with the pressure on the state of Maryland in terms of the budget after all this coronavirus thing, where does that stand now? Is it going to get funded to any degree, or is this going to be kick the can down the road type of thing?
Well, Don, do you want to give the 10-second summary of Kerwin for any of our watchers who may not have been following it as closely as
I'll
we
leave
have?
that to Mark. He's probably more expert than I am.
10 seconds. More money with less strings to Maryland schools, costing billions of dollars per year. Is that about 10 seconds?
Okay, that's good. So the question is that, with the budgetary constraints that Maryland's going to be facing, what happens to that?
Well, earlier this week, it was interesting when we did our other show, Direct Line, one of our Democratic guests agreed that it just is not going to go forward. It's got to be deferred because of the financial, the economic circumstances we're in. So that may be the case.
And I think if it gets deferred,
Hopefully it'll be deferred forever.
Indefinitely.
Well,
yeah.
actually, you know what's going to happen, Ryan, is it's probably they won't take it up next year because they're going into an election year. So it will be the first thing that because next year is the year before they're up for re-election.
It's 2 sessions before though. That's like time. That's the time to forget.
I don't know. People aren't going to forget because they're going to be because the taxes will kick in during that election cycle. I mean, and then this will be the first bill that Governor Rutherford or Governor Ficker will veto.
It's got a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
What is
I'll tell you
that? Perpetual candidate.
Yeah, I mean, he's like Ross Pierpont, the next generation.
All right, let's talk about mail order ballots.
Yeah, vote by mail.
Mail order ballots.
Mail order ballot, whatever.
Sort of like mail order brides, mail order ballots.
Paid for and bought by the DNC.
So we've already experienced this in Maryland, at least for Baltimore for their voting, and then as I understand, ballots are going to be mailed out to us for the primary, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Within the week, I've heard.
Oh
that
my
they're
gosh.
The
getting
next couple
them.
of days,
So,
according to
I mean,
what I've heard.
this is a big push by Democrats. Nancy Pelosi had said on national television, I mean, with the next stimulus package that they want to push through whenever they get together again as a House, is that this is going to be a big part of that package. Is that they want to, they want more vote by mail, proposals. They'd love to see it nationwide, for a general election. But inevitably, I mean, what are we looking at here? How do they, ensure the integrity of the ballot? When it arrives at someone's home, how is it getting back in the mail? Is it going to make it to the Board of Elections, unimpeded? No one's going to be fiddling with it. Aren't there a litany of problems with this?
We already have a problem with people coming in stealing credit card applications out of your mailbox and applying for credit cards in your name. What's going to stop the same thieves from stealing your mailbox, taking your ballot, and voting Democrat?
Well, the other issue, and this is sort of looking at the different ways vote by mail are implemented. In California, they've allowed, over a period of years, a process which allows what is called harvesting. And this involves a process where campaign people, party people basically go out and door knock and get the ballots, and then they take on the responsibility to bring to take the ballots delivered to the Board of Elections. And that has just huge potential for fraud. So
that sounds like all kinds of illegal.
Yes.
yeah, well, no.
No, it's not. That's the problem.
That's interesting is that in some states that's thoroughly illegal. North Carolina, you go to jail for that kind of stuff, whereas in California they didn't originally, but now they allow that as a quote turnout method.
I think it ought to be illegal, right? No one on this stream should be handling a ballot.
Yeah,
I-
it's like this. Right?
Especially Dwight.
Absolutely.
They
Absolutely.
ought to put that in the law, and I think the guy you ran against is in a good position, Dwight, to make sure that's part of Maryland law. Dwight Patel cannot handle any ballot other than his own.
Yeah, and honestly, first of all, I think this whole voting by mail, early voting, let's just get down the whole, this is all Democrat engineering fraud.
Could I
early
point out
voting.
there's a lawsuit in Georgia on vote by mail, and the complaint is now to be clear, it's a complaint is that putting a postage stamp on is a poll tax.
Yeah.
So now the thing is, in Maryland we don't have that issue because there's a business reply envelope, so you don't have to do that. But that is an issue. It's kind of an interesting legal issue.
Yes.
And in many jurisdictions where they're doing this, they are doing it, so you don't have to put a stamp on
We're
it.
going to put democracy in the hands of the United States Postal Service. I feel real safe about that.
It just kind of dawned on me. I guess I was a little slow. So what happens if the Postal Service goes out of business in July?
That's why all the Democrats started buying stamps.
That's what it was.
I know there's a rush to buy stamps, so that's really going to help a whole lot of them.
But
I thought
there's
that was because I ran out of toilet paper.
Hey,
So
I've got
if there's
stamps. I'll sell to the highest bidder. I've got stamps from.
I have one book of Star Trek stamps.
Wait a second.
and that's
So
it.
if the Postal Service goes out of business in July, how do you do vote by mail?
That's why they're buying stamps. It's not irrational. There's nothing rational about this.
So will Federal Express, will Amazon handle the ballots?
If a stamp is a poll tax, FedEx definitely is.
I don't think private companies should handle ballots either.
I actually prefer it because it's competition, right? Dwight should not be able to handle a ballot, but FedEx or UPS should. It's like that way you're in trust. You have the choice of who you trust to get your ballot in.
Well, how about this for an option? This is very far out there. So a couple weeks ago, watched the mini docuseries McMillions, and there was this whole. Did any of you guys watch it?
No, what's it on?
It was on HBO, but I watched it on Hulu. But it was this whole thing about the McDonald's Monopoly game fraud scandal thing from the early 2000s.
I remember that Monopoly game.
Okay, well, not to go off tangent too much, but
That's why I never won.
they used a printing company that was supposed to be this whole secured lockdown system with vaults and layers of security, protecting these $1 million prize stickers and everything like that. So something along those lines, or something like Iron Mountain, or one of these companies that handles private health information and recycling of private health information. Some kind of company like that is specifically meant to handle sensitive information like that cannot be tampered with. Obviously, it didn't work in the McMillions case because there were millions of dollars stolen in the scandal, but, I digress.
But
I do want to say one thing too, but Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, or at least enlighten us a little bit more. That Dowd harvesting deal in California, didn't it kind of look to us, as at least from Republican side, that it actually switched some races? We had, because they went, Republicans that were leading by the end of the evening, or whatever, by the morning or whenever they finally gathered all those in, a lot of incumbents lost their races.
I think it was in Orange County.
Yep, it was in Orange County. There was a few congressional seats.
Yep.
Orange County went in the span of a few years from being mostly, if not all, Republican representation to none, I believe.
Ryan, I remember in Orange County, from far as I could see, was controlled by Republicans in Orange County. Don and I used to go to
Bob.
Yeah, Orange County went the way of Nassau County, Dwight.
I would like to vote by Google
Yeah.
poll.
Google poll. Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay, here's a question. Would you trust Facebook to handle the election?
absolutely
Not
No.
after their political.
You know what? I think if they would have stood up to the people who tried to complain and bicker about the so-called Russian collusion, I would have trusted them. But now that Jackie has to send in get a notary to run ads.
Damn notary.
I have more faith in giving the ballots to a 10-year-old than I do Facebook running an election.
Yeah,
That is an
they
insult
would
to
just
10-year-olds.
tell us, you don't actually have to vote because they have an algorithm that could tell us
Right.
who
We'll
should
predict
win.
your vote for you. It's
Sure,
fine.
yeah. Why? Let's just let AI take care of the
Right.
vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Theory for president.
didn't Barack Hussein Obama want to do that for the census, take a sampling? And
It's just.
I don't-
All right, but
Yeah.
let me pose this to
Let's
you.
talk about one of the other big stories today. Joe Biden went on MSNBC this morning to publicly, deny that the Tara Reid sexual assault allegation was true. So it didn't happen.
It only took a week.
Yeah, I don't know. Did any of you actually see the interview by any chance? Okay, so
I read about it.
I saw a transcript from it.
yeah, so I mean, MSNBC hyped this thing, so I actually had this running since like 6 o'clock. Had to wait 2 hours before this darn thing showed up.
for you.
But I will say, I will, as much as NBC, has that super liberal bent. I think in this case, I think Mika Brzezinski did a pretty good job of trying to hold Joe Biden's feet to the fire on this, because she really did grill him, and I think she was actually kind of exasperated in asking this question. She kept trying to ask the question about opening up the records, and he talked about the National Archive records and that he'll have those open. But when she hit him on this Delaware thing, all his records at the University of Delaware, Senate papers, he really didn't want to go down there. He says, well, there are no personnel files in there.
Yep.
And
Then why can't you open them up?
No, here's what I think the Trump
And then
campaign
there's
ought to
an
do.
investigation.
Brad Parscale or Dave Bossie, if you're listening, you get the tweets of all the liberal commentators and politicians blasting Kavanaugh and saying he has to withdraw, his nomination must be withdrawn immediately, compared to the hashtag I believe Biden, side by side. That should be your entire Facebook advertising budget from now until Election Day. Because it's just the most absurd thing.
There's another response there, Don, to your point, where they then said, well, what about an investigation, if there's a private investigation into the records at the University of Delaware? And he said, well, who would be conducting that search?
right,
Yeah.
if you actually watch that segment, this is the thing. I was watching this, and he says that as if like, yeah, who should do this? I don't know. And and Mika, I think she was just stunned by that answer, and she's like, well, how about the people at the University of Delaware,
Yeah.
for example?
Right.
I think they should have Alyssa Milano lead the investigation.
There's no way to guarantee there's a ghost door in Mark's house. Sorry, that distracted me. Your door just
Right.
opened.
Sorry, I know.
But no, it's okay. There's no way to guarantee, an unbiased party anymore. Everybody has some kind of political influence in their life, their own personal, beliefs, and particularly in such a highly politically charged environment like we have now, I mean, I
But
really
we have-
could see that there's no way to guarantee
no,
that
no.
the party is not going to
Bill
be
Barr,
going
Bill
in with their
Barr
own
has
mindset.
shown. Bill Barr could do the investigation. We've seen Bill Barr is above approach. Bill Barr, Attorney General, he could do the investigation, and
As if the left would ever let that
Yeah,
happen.
yeah, exactly.
the left wouldn't. But you know something? It's too bad we're running the show.
Yeah.
Quite frankly,
No,
we,
We're running
That's-
some of the show.
Look, you don't want this to be just a partisan, become
Oh,
off as
please.
a partisan. No,
you know,
seriously,
we're being too
Dwight.
nice.
No,
We're
Dwight.
being too nice to
I'll,
Dwight,
Yeah.
we want to go through the records and find out what or find out.
No.
I don't think it's
But even if you're going to look at it from a hyper-partisan perspective, I still think that's the wrong approach because
Yeah.
right now the Republicans are winning this one, and the minute that we make an appearance of being partisan, we begin losing. We don't want to give up our
Honestly,
lead.
the more Biden's shooting himself in the foot here, the more he keeps saying there's nothing there, there's nothing there, there's nothing there. It's reverse psychology. Clearly, there's something there because you're so profusely saying that there's not.
Yes.
Right. I mean, here's the thing too. I mean, Jackie, it's just that during that particular exchange and everything like this. I mean, Mika Brzezinski said, the scope of the search of the records will be limited to Tara Reid, right? So just search on her name.
Yep.
Now, Biden had earlier during the interview had talked about things are in the records. No personal records have ever been released like this before. Why should they now? Because he mentioned that there are conversations maybe with Putin and other things. I thought the first thing that came to my mind immediately was just that what Biden is worried about is that if they go in there and somebody does expand the search, which is probable, I mean, that they will find things that will be very damaging to Biden during this campaign, things that he had said or written about others that would just blow his campaign up totally at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing's for clear, he obviously has something to hide there.
No. This is a mess they created, by the way, because if they hadn't totally gaslighted Brett Kavanaugh unfairly, this would almost be, I mean, it wouldn't be a non-issue, but it would be something that he could get through. But because they set these standards for themselves, right, of that we should believe all women with no evidence and there's no due process anymore in America, they made this issue orders of magnitudes worse for themselves than it would have been.
But what was
Among
Nancy
their own
Pelosi's
supporters,
response
too.
to that? Nancy Pelosi said, I don't need a lecture, so don't lecture her.
Oh, I thought she said let them eat ice cream.
No, she literally, there was a reporter who asked her, you insisted on this investigation for Kavanaugh. You said this is entirely necessary. He has to prove his innocence. Why aren't you saying that now with Joe Biden? And her response was, you don't need to lecture me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, to both your points there too, in terms of this whole thing about believing this, the accuser. When Mika went after Biden about this, didn't you say we should believe all women? He's like, his caveat is that yes, if they have been vetted, right? Where was that on our side?
Because when when the person who accused Kavanaugh couldn't even remember the night it happened, that was the utmost standard of vetting, right? But that's just the most absurd response possible to this.
And Biden was also saying, there's so many holes in the story here.
To kind of loop
honestly,
back,
I haven't seen any.
I think that we should. It's too bad if Brett Kavanaugh was. I'm very glad he was confirmed, but if he was not, we could give him a second gig as the investigator for this, because I think he's the only person in America capable of approaching this fairly, as someone who's been through it before.
Right.
In a similar scenario, right? Where
I agree.
yeah.
This has always been my take on the whole Me Too movement and sexual assault cases in general, is there are enough vindictive people out there that would lie about being sexually assaulted in order to get revenge on someone. It's happened, and it does happen, and it will continue to happen, and people will take advantage of that. And I've always been a believer that there really does need to be evidence, not that people's claims should be ignored or just dismissed because they don't have any kind of proof, but also, do you really want to go ahead and just destroy someone's life without any kind of proof or evidence? And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, that's my opinion on sexual assault cases in general. I think that both sides deserve to be heard.
And here's the thing, not to go political, hyper-political and all this, but the left has a track record of making stuff up. We saw this in 2004, where they had the mystery documents about President George W. Bush shirking his responsibilities in leaving the National Guard and all that stuff. We knew on the face of it was false. But Dan Rather and the lefty medias, they kept going and going. That is when they all lost credibility with majority of free-thinking Americans that don't believe everything you hear on CNN, CBS. I mean, Don, your dad had a career of exposing the left. Remember Operation Tailwind, which CNN manufactured, created, or the Westmoreland interview? I mean, this is just a pattern of bad behavior from the left.
So realistically, and this is a question to the group, I want to hear everyone's opinion on it. How do you see this playing out? Do you think they're going to find something? Do you think it's just going to slide? How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, one thing I think is that, Tara Reid has said that she's willing to, to testify under oath, right? So, I mean, I think that gives her a little bit more credibility at this point in time, that she's willing to go there and swear that, what she says is the truth. That'll be really interesting to see if that actually indeed happens, because I think that just, keeps this whole issue. And I mean, Biden has just got this problem. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that he didn't really help himself. He was sticking so much to his talking points today, until he got a little flustered with that whole exchange with Mika about the opening the records and stuff like that. That this is a problem that the DNC, other Democrats have got to figure out. I mean, and then Nancy Pelosi's like, well, he satisfied me or something to that effect. He's dealt with the issue, right?
Given his record for flubbing recently, I'm shocked it didn't happen more.
This is him being at his this is his best response at the moment, because in previous weeks you've seen him at a much lower performance level. So
this was his A game.
Yeah. So this is as good as it gets for him. It seems. It's just going to be worse. Just to reiterate what I've said in previous streams. I don't see him being the nominee.
Well, no, he's got to be the nominee. Okay, it'd be so unfair to all the Biden bros that supported supported Joe through all the bad times and good times. They were with him in Iowa.
Dwight, did you see Elizabeth Warren started running Facebook ads again?
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Pocahontas?
Yes, because she's going to be the one that swoops in at the convention, apparently.
You think it's going to be her and
The
not
the Elizabeth Warren, Stacey Abrams ticket, right? Two people with a history of
Stacey Abrams is actually she's the first person, I think, since Gerald Ford is actively campaigning to be vice president.
she's putting herself out
Okay,
there.
but
That's interesting. Where are the ads running? Are they running?
They're running on Facebook. I didn't see them. I believe they're being targeted at Democrats, but I saw somebody share a screenshot of, it was a reasonably credible source, someone I know who's involved in Democrat politics, shared with me a screenshot of these ads that are going around that was being run this week. So, and it was not phrased as an Elizabeth Warren for president. It was Elizabeth Warren is still in the fight for you. Donate now. But they're still collecting donations to her federal account.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes, but they were running them nationwide and not just in Massachusetts. I don't know if this is just to bolster her Senate run but it is interesting the timing that it started when this all is happening. And to kind of give my take on the whole Tara Reid thing, it pains me to defend Joe Biden because politically I think he has it coming and he deserves it. But I think that in order to be morally consistent, I think there's a reason and I probably can't even say this anymore, I'll be ridiculed for it, but there's a reason there's a statute of limitations, right? Because you can't, 25 years later, it's really hard to defend yourself or prove something one way or the other. So to come out, both the Kavanaugh accuser and Tara Reid, to come out 25 years later, coincidentally when the accused is in seeking the highest office of their life, I think there's an element of wrong to that, right? You should not. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ignore cases that are held until after the date where it happens, but 25 years is a lot of years, right? To be sitting on that for 25 years, and then all of a sudden when someone's nominated for the Supreme Court or running for president, I mean, there's a part of me where, politically, I feel like he deserves it, but as a person, I mean, Joe Biden, I've said it before, is an old man showing signs of pre-dementia. And now he's being accused of sexual assault from 25 years ago. He probably doesn't even remember if it happened. I mean,
I'm sure he legitimately has no recollection.
No,
Right.
he might not even
Yeah,
remember.
but there is evidence that came out. I believe, and they mentioned the mother having a phone call to Larry King in 1993. Things
By the way,
like
that video just mysteriously disappeared.
Yeah, no, that is. I guess that's a kind of counterpoint to what I said, but Larry
But
King is.
I agree with you for the
Yeah.
most part in that sense that, and you know, I worked a lot in student health when I was in college, and there was a lot of, well, sometimes it takes years to get over that trauma to a place where you feel like you actually can say something and speak up about it. Do I think that there are people on both sides who would definitely use that to political gain and use them as political pawns? Absolutely, and I think that's exactly what we saw with Blasey Ford during the Kavanaugh hearing. Is that what's happening here? Possibly. But at the same time, I think at this point, the statute of limitations, unfortunately, is out the window, and we owe it to Tara Reid, to both parties, and to Brett Kavanaugh especially, to hold a hearing here and to do a formal investigation.
I agree, and I'll say this, okay? I mean, partisanship aside, I think Joe has worked really, really, really hard. I mean, he was there in Iowa, he was there in New Hampshire. Now he's going to be the nominee, and they should give it to the old man. As John McCain once said, I'm next in line.
You know, I'm going to agree with Marcus here. I think he's not going to be the nominee. I didn't agree until this. I think that this is the justification they needed to pull a switcheroo.
But if they don't give it to him, even with all this going on, I think Bernie Sanders is going to start something.
You know what? They need to get rid of. Their biggest mistake was reducing the power of the superdelegates. They should never have caved to the Bernie Bros. It's once you cave to them, it's like feeding the geese in the Washingtonian Center, right? They won't leave you alone. They.
And you know,
Who's idiotic enough to feed those geese?
Apparently, Ryan.
by the way, you know, Ryan, what do you call the Bernie folks are already upset that the New York primary has been canceled, and they're just going to, all the delegates are going to go to Joe Biden. You know?
Yeah.
And I mean,
That's not the way it works in New York.
no, but that's what they did. They canceled.
Let me tell you, and I know that, but
No, let me tell you,
Andrew
the way it works-
Cuomo is sneakier than
Hey, remember? We all remember 1996 when Alphonse and they kept everyone else off the ballot to keep Bob Dole was only Republican on the
Okay,
ballot.
closing thoughts.
Anyways, let's
7:58.
finish off with one more political thing, because I do want to get real quick opinion about this, which is Justin Amash is thinking about exploring a libertarian run for president. Who do you think this hurts more? I mean, if he actually goes through with this, does this hurt Trump, or does this hurt Biden, or whoever the Democrat nominee may
I
be?
don't think it's going to hurt either of them in any significant way.
Yeah, libertarian candidates and Green Party candidates get overanalyzed all the time. The reality is they're insignificant.
This is Justin Amash, for crying out loud. You know, it's going to be him and who's going to be his running mate? That other guy, Gary Johnson. They're going to flip it around. It's going to be Amash Johnson this time around. I mean, it's like, you know, I really don't like it when, you know, Republicans take their marbles and go away and stomp their feet and become libertarians. But, you know, secretly, they're going to become Democrats at some point anyways. They all stomp off. They all pretend to be...
I don't think Justin Amash is going to become a Democrat, but
yeah, no, I think that's a little.
You know,
I don't think they would want him,
to
frankly.
quote John Dulles, if you're not with us, you're against us.
So,
On that note-
why is Amash doing this? Is that he doesn't see a chance of winning his own seat back this year?
He's going to lose his own primary. I think that especially the president almost has a personal vendetta against Amash, where I feel that there would be
Many
enough.
personal vendettas.
There would be, yes, out of many, there would be a national pressure to kind of bolster up his primary opponent, which we are already seeing to begin happening. Or not really even his primary opponent anymore, because there's no longer a primary. His Republican opponent was going to essentially split votes with him and elect the Democrat to Congress either way. So, if anything, he's preserving. The one benefit he's doing here is he's preserving that seat potentially for the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. So, in that way, we should thank Justin Amash for stepping aside. But I think the whole thing's a little bit ridiculous, to be honest.
Okay, we do need to wrap up, so let's get to closing thoughts. Mark, let's start
Well,
with you.
Well, before you go to the closing
Let Marcus
thoughts,
start with this.
or yeah, or maybe this is gonna be my closing thought, however you want it. Just to make sure everyone knew, the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels are doing their flyover tomorrow across Baltimore and the Washington D.C. area. So and there's the Blue Angels and multiple places like tweeted out the maps, the flight routes. So yeah, they'll be going over, see, PG County Hospital, going over the National Mall, going up the Potomac, and then going up the GW Parkway, then peeling off, and actually going. It looks like down across Goldsboro or something. I mean, basically, it's going to turn and go over Suburban Hospital, loop around Silver Spring, again over DC, and then back over to Virginia, going like up and down Route 50 and Fairfax and back. So
I read that they'll be in Bethesda around 11:50 a.m. So that would probably be roughly around your best time to see them in Montgomery County.
Yes, and just to stress, there was the original time they were gonna fly. It was like a week ago or so, and a whole bunch of people went to Suburban Hospital. You shouldn't do that. That's for just people who are there. They're going to be in the air flying, so you can see them wherever.
Near your house, look up.
Yeah, and I think Montgomery County Police or district, one of the precinct districts, actually said, well, you can maybe go to a park and be socially distant, but don't
I
necessarily.
wouldn't advise that. When they were in New
look in
Jersey the other day, my cousin said that she had a friend who went to wherever the public meeting place was, and there were like 600 people there.
Yeah, there's different guidance from different things. I believe I believe like the county or Maryland said, do it from your house. I just remember seeing like actual something from the local police saying, do not go to suburban, an outdoor space, but not suburban, and be socially distant from people.
Right.
But yes, around 11:55, 12 o'clock tomorrow.
All right. Do you want that to be your closing thought, or do you have another
That's
closing
good enough.
thought?
No, that's good enough for me.
All right, Mark.
This week we got some really sad news, at least for me, which is that Red Maryland is going to cease operations beginning June 1st.
June
Brian
4th.
June 4th.
After the
Actually,
primary.
you're right. It's right after the primary. That's when they're going to end that. Brian Griffin's going on to set up another venture a little bit broader than just Maryland, but I think that there'll be a real vacuum there without Red Maryland. And the other way to look at it, since Dwight likes to look things as half full, is that Red Maryland has really been a wonderful resource for conservatives and Republicans in Maryland for the last decade.
For local politics.
For
you
local
mean,
politics.
State politics.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Ryan, what you got?
I'll keep it short and simple. I'd like to kind of echo Mark's thoughts about Red Maryland. I know of all the things they did, this is probably the most insider baseball-ish, but the convention shows were a lot of fun, and I think if Brian isn't going to continue it at the Duck Pin, we should consider holding Dr. Politics convention shows the Friday night before. So,
I'm all about that.
I agree. Yeah.
yes,
We always have a nice suite, so.
yeah, carry on
Big
the
shoes
tradition.
to fill, but yep. Don.
I think I'll go to football. So NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is going to forego his $4 million salary, and I guess he has his pay package is worth $40 million all told, as the NFL takes their own hits from coronavirus, and they start making some cutbacks because they're hoping for football in the fall, but no one really knows for sure yet, right? So, but good for Goodell, but I think he can afford it.
Dwight.
I think members of Congress should follow that same lead and not take their salary while they're not in Washington. I mean, God knows they're overpaid as it is. I think we should have merit-based pay for members of Congress. If you raise taxes, no raise, no nothing, then you get a pay cut. But that'll never happen. But because they're all, most of them, every Nancy Pelosi has to pay for her, what is it, $15 a pint
Jackie,
ice cream.
could I point out that is as bipartisan as Dwight ever gets? He didn't
Let's
say
savor this moment.
he didn't say all Democrats should have their pay cut and Republicans should get paid. He said everybody should get their pay cut.
I agree. It's like they should take the lead. I mean, look, the president of the United States doesn't
Leave
take
it at
the salary.
that. Leave it at that.
Here we go.
Jack.
All right, my closing thought is I read right before we started the stream today that they're opening another Amazon fulfillment center in Maryland. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Maybe more to come on that next week. And also, if you enjoyed the show, give us a like, give the video a like.
Smash the like
to your
button.
friends. Smash that like button. Go ahead and like our page, Dr. Politics and the Political Architects Show. And if you want to hear more local news about Republican events happening in Montgomery County, we have the Montgomery County Republican Club Facebook page. We encourage you to go over there and check it out as well, because we have a lot of great events that we're doing virtually and then hopefully once again in person one day.
Also, next week's Direct Line, tune in. We've got a very special guest, Governor McCrory of North Carolina, 2012 to 2016. He was the governor of the great state of North Carolina. Before that, he was the revolutionary mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. He's going to talk to us about what his plans are about Charlotte and the convention.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.